Welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside a guy who's just becoming a regular around these parts. We had him in earlier in the week for the Central Division deep dive, and now we bring him back for some scintillating Southeast Division action from CBSSports.com. It's Brad Botkin. What's up, Brad?
What's up, John? I got to tell you, before we even start on this, the doldrums of this preview of the worst division in the NBA, I was trying to figure out if you actually spell your name John or Jawn. And so I was typing it in, and I came across a fantastic article on the real life heist in Vegas off of the Ocean's 11 play. I was fascinated with this. So chef's kiss stuff on that.
Thank you very much. That was done in a previous life at a website to be named some other time. But
I guess spell your name?
So it is John. But so I'm in Philadelphia right now. It's very funny that you bring this up because in Philly, there's a word called Jawn, Jawn, and it's basically like a noun that you can use for anything. Like my phone's a John, you're a John, this cup's a John. Go get me a John. So I spell it like that just for the Philly component. But it's funny that you bring it up because I sometimes will go on other programs from like Canada, and then there's one I do in Ireland that I pop on with, and it took them a while. They were convinced my name was Jawn. So
that makes sense. That's good. I like that. That's like that.
Yes,
I like that.
It's an homage to my homeland. And like I said, we're going to do the Southeast Division. So already in the books earlier, we've done the Central Division. If you missed that, that's on our feed. You can check that out. Bill and I just did the Atlantic Division on Wednesday, and now today, Friday, we're doing the Southeast Division. We had to bring in the big guns. Brad, you got the major assignment here for the Southeast Division. We are starting with the Orlando Magic, who finished 47-35 last year. 5th place in the Eastern Conference, lost in the first round to the Cavaliers in 7 games. Not a great offense, 22nd in offense last year, Brad, but 3rd in defense. They're kind of like a not as good Wolves starter kit. And they go and add KCP in the offseason on a deal 3 years for $66 million. They also extend Franz Wagner, Mo Wagner, Jonathan Isaac got into a 5-year deal. If they can get him healthy, he's all of a sudden he's already one of the best defenders in the NBA. It's just about getting him healthy. Top line here. How do you feel about the Orlando Magic on the whole?
Well, I like the Magic. I mean, we're starting from a positive place in this division. I think they're really good. I love Banchero. I love Wagner. You know, right now, Wagner, in a vacuum, we always do this when these guys are high draft picks and you've built your team around them, and then they come into extension time and you think, is that guy really a max player? But you have to do it. You know, you're building your team around him. So I'm not sure Wagner in a vacuum, until he improves his 3-point shooting consistently, is really as much money as he got, worth as much money as he got. But the Magic are good. They're awesome defensively. More and more we're seeing, John, the importance of ball pressure, and Suggs is right up there with anybody not named Drew Holiday, and might even be creeping up on Holiday. He's a dog defensively. You just wish that they could go out and get a scoring point guard, somebody that could threaten the defense in pick and roll, stretch the floor, and give Banchero and Wagner a little bit more room to work. You know, I'm thinking Trae Young. I'm thinking Darius Garland. You'd have to talk about how you could build up enough without giving away your foundation to trade for somebody like that. I don't know exactly how many picks the Magic have. But if they could land something like that, this suddenly becomes a very, very serious team. Good team right now. I think a scoring point guard away from being a serious team.
Scoring point guard would be good. KCP certainly helps offensively. He's a really good 3-point shooter, and obviously defensively, he's going to be a seamless fit for them. But you're absolutely right. Offensively, they have been challenged for quite some time. Producer Aaron points this out. Last year was the 12th consecutive season that the Orlando Magic have had a bottom 10 offense. Look, I love defense. Defense is important. They have awesome defensive pieces. Just from a consumption standpoint, though, it's sometimes a very difficult watch on the Orlando Magic. Fun to watch them at the one end, but it can be a super rock fight at the other. I want to ask you here, too, because I think they're really on to something with Paolo Banchero. He was an all-star for the first time last year. He's a very good player. Franz Wagner did not have his best season last year. And they come into this offseason, and they had a decision to make. And the decision was, do we just automatically max him because that's basically what you did previously, but this new CBA kind of throws a wrinkle into it? Or do we try to get a little bit of a discount because he probably isn't on the merits right now, at least. He could potentially be in the future, but right now, maybe not a max player. They go with the old model. They give him the 5-year, $224 million max. I'm gauging your temperature here. Where are you on Franz, and what do you think about giving him the full kit and caboodle?
Again, I think
I never
it's one
say
of these...
kit and caboodle, by the way. I don't know why I just did.
I think it's what, like I said, I think it's one of these things where you're forced into it. It's not quite like a Tyler Hero extension, but it's like he's your guy. You don't really have it just in terms of your overall sales package. You aren't going to go out and really do too much better. I mean, if you wanted to get crazy and you didn't believe in Wagner as a max player and you believe that Banchero is the guy you want to build around, I mean, I guess you could go out and, I think this is still shoppable. But the big thing with the Magic is they had a ton of money. So they almost had to start getting rid of money. And I love Wagner. So, I mean, this is a long way of saying that I think Wagner's a splendid player. I really do. He can get into the paint on pretty much anyone. He's really crafty with his footwork. He's one of those like YMCA players that just like he can just figure out without like explosive quickness, without explosive athleticism. He can just figure out how to get a few dance steps on you and be arrhythmic with his footwork and end up leveraging you and getting into the paint and finishing. We saw it in the Olympics. The 3-point shot is what's going to make him a superstar. But I like Wagner. I mean, I don't see how the Magic could be anything but optimistic about Wagner and Banchero and their ability to create offense. I mean, you talked about it, that it can be a rock fight. It can. But one of the things that does make the Magic interesting watching is they don't look like every other team just running high pick and roll with, these great shooting point guards that we've all got spoiled by, and now they've become almost homogenous. So like the Magic are running their offense through two damn near 7-footers. And it's pretty fun to watch that inverted style. And you start to think from a matchup standpoint, if they ever got to a place in the playoffs where they had one more guy that was really a threatening scorer, their ability to pull guys out in defensive matchups and make them guard as not stretch shooters. We've seen that. Brook Lopez, he pulls his guy out. Porzingis, he pulls his guy out. Banchero can pull his guy out and make him actually defend as an initiator in pick and roll. So that is one interesting part of it. I like Wagner and I like the Magic. I just, again, in a vacuum, is he 5-year supermax guy? Like, I don't know. But if he develops his 3-point shot consistently, yes, he is.
Yeah, their draft, they control their own draft going forward, and then like a handful of second-round picks. So they don't have like a ton of draft capital that they can just swing around here. I love the KCP edition. I'm complete unison with you that like they had so much money that even if it was like, even with the new CBA and even with like maybe things changing going forward, they had so much money that it was like, yeah, we're just going to give it to Franz because he is our guy. And yes, he was not quite as efficient as we wanted him to be last year in terms of shooting the ball, but he is one of two guys on our team who can generate offense, and he's young, and we're just going to give him the money. Because, Brad, even after making all these moves, including signing KCP for 3 years at $66 million and extending Franz on the max, I said Mox like Franz. All of a sudden, I'm doing a German accent. No, the whole thing is haywire today. I'm a little punchy. $25 million under the first apron, even after all that. So, yes, like they had a lot of money to throw around. I would have liked, like you, to see them supplement Jalen Suggs with an offensive guard. I had been saying previously, I thought if D'Angelo Russell was going to opt out, there aren't a lot of places for D'Angelo Russell to go. But D'Angelo Russell would have been a nice compliment because he is an offensive guard. And you can paper over some of his defensive deficiencies with a guy like Jalen Suggs and Jonathan Isaac behind them. And, they have so many really quality top-line defenders, now KCP as well. But he decided to stay put in LA. I thought he could have gotten a raise if he left. Maybe not. Maybe the market wasn't there. But clearly that's something they need to address between now and the deadline.
Yeah, it's interesting, because yes, it's something you need to address at the deadline if they're thinking about this year, but they have such a long runway with this core that you wouldn't mind getting a young guy that maybe isn't ready to be a go-to scorer right now, but is that type of player. And in 3 years, when the Magic are ready to compete, 2 years, he's on that timeline. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm dreaming here, but like, is Jalen Green like gettable with Shepherd, coming in and
that's interesting.
Like somebody like that like could stay on that same timeline, and they could all hit their stride together. I mean, that's might be what I'm looking for. I mean, I'd be super excited about this team if they got Garland or Young right now. But I think they can open up their search a little bit and look for some of these younger guys. Like a Tyus Jones would have been cool there as a guy right now. But I'd kind of like them to go and get sort of like San Antonio. I'd like to get them somebody that's still a couple years away, but is super high potential as a scoring guard. Then things can kind of hit the peak together.
Yeah, Darius Garland, if it doesn't work with Kenny Atkinson reconfiguring and they decide to unplug him because they're happy to have Donovan Mitchell around, that's an interesting idea. Jalen Green's interesting too, because people, certainly Bill and Ashley and Aaron know, and our listeners know, I'll tell you, I was so high on Houston, and all of a sudden now that roster's getting pretty clogged for Ime Udoka.
Yeah.
Where you go like, okay, how am I getting everybody minutes? And you mentioned Reed Shepherd, so maybe Jalen Green is somebody who they unplug. That's an interesting one there. I think probably enough time on the Orlando Magic here. Let's do, as we do with all of our division deep dives, we're going to end each team with a best move and a worst move. Give me your best and worst moves for the Orlando Magic this offseason.
It's hard for me to say a worst move, but I think clearly the best move is the Isaac extension, because you mentioned Isaac. If you just look at his time on the court, just sort of like a per minute basis, you've got a case for him as maybe the best defender in the NBA. I mean, that guy,
he's really good.
Is a stud defensively. I think he's a guy that can actually develop, in terms of his range. There's something about him that I like offensively. And in their ability to put that kind of length on the floor defensively, and with Wagner and Banchero again being legitimate initiators. I mean, you're playing with 3, 6, 10. You're going into every game with a big advantage. But the second part about that extension is that they front loaded it, and that was really important because they give them a whole bunch of money now. Because like you said, they got a bunch of money. They're going to have to get up to the floor, and so they might as well spend it on their own guys. So they front load it on Isaac, and then it starts descending. And that's important because when Suggs and Banchero and these guys start coming up for extensions in this new second apron world, Isaac will be making less money in 2-3 years from now. And so that –
and makes it more tradable.
Exactly. So I think Isaac as a player and how they structured the contract was their best move with a nice little nod to KCP.
You got a worse, or you want to skip that?
I don't know. I mean, what was the worst? Like, I don't think they did anything detrimental. I mean, they could have done maybe more aggressive, but I would have had to have been in the front office meetings, know what phone calls they didn't take. I don't think they did anything detrimental.
Yeah, fair enough. I think the Isaac one is a great one for best. For me, for best, it's KCP, prying him away from Denver. He fits in seamlessly. He adds some shooting. He's such a good defender. They get even better defensively, which is crazy because they were third last year. So that's best for me. And then worst is I think what we were talking about, just the fact that they need an offensive guard. They need more offense. I mean, they have to look, it's awesome that at one end of the floor, they're going to be elite. At the other end of the floor, they are a long way away from even being average. So I would like to have seen them do something offensively. I don't know what that would have been. It clearly wasn't what they did, which was not much offensively, but we'll see whether or not they add at the deadline, because they could certainly use some help there. All right, we're going to take a break, and then on the other side, we're going to continue with our Southeast Division deep dive and get into the Miami Heat and whether or not they can rebound from last season. John Gonzalez and Brad Botkin, and you're listening to Beyond the Arc.
You hear that? It's the steady pulse of the world's game that's turning fans into family and sports into passion. You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer. The USL on CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder that you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review if you'd be so kind. It helps people find us. All right, we're continuing our Southeast Division deep dive with Brad Botkin from CBSSports.com. We're on to the Miami Heat, Brad. Last year, 46-36, finished 8th in the East. They lost in the first round to the Celtics 4-1 after Jimmy Butler went down. They were surprisingly good. I didn't remember this, that they were fifth defensively, fifth in defensive rating, and then just 21st in offensive rating. Jimmy Butler missed a ton of time, again, because Jimmy Butler always does. They added Alec Burks. They lost Caleb Martin because Caleb Martin decided to take less money to go play for the Sixers, which I am thankful for. But I think maybe in retrospect, he would like that decision over again. And then in the offseason, they extend Bam Adebayo 3 years for $166. Kevin Love's back, Thomas Bryant's back, Haywood Highsmith's back. But the big one here is Bam. How do you feel about them? Losing Jimmy obviously was like a killer. And, you know, we know Jimmy loves to jabber, and he had a lot to say about how they would have unseated the Boston Celtics. I'm not so sure, even though they did that previous year. Where are you on the Heat this season? It doesn't feel quite as rosy in Miami.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I think in the interest of, like, you know, if somebody's driving, listening to this podcast right now, in the interest of them not like swerving off the road and running into a stop sign out of boredom, the Heat are like almost not even worth talking about until April when they get exciting, because they're always like this whatever team. Jimmy Butler doesn't try. He misses 20, 25 games. And there's always this interesting element of like, can they flip the switch? They've done it so many times. There's, you know, it gets frustrating that the Heat don't seem to do more, that they're always so content with what they have, and then they end up being pretty good with it. But they've lost, you know, Rozier's pretty good. Him and Hero are pretty redundant. If you're looking at the roster in a vacuum and you sort of throw the Heat culture stuff out and their ability to play above the sum of their parts, it never looks that good. They look to be at a talent deficit every year.
Yeah.
And then Jimmy Butler closes the gap in the playoffs. But the key is it doesn't really do you any good, even though they did make it as an 8 seed. So it's like, you know, there's always something to prove me wrong with this, but it's pretty tough when you're asking Jimmy Butler to flip that switch from the play-in. So it's like, can the Heat get to the 5th seed, you know, and play the Sixers in the first round and do what the Heat do? You know, that's really the only thing there is to talk about with the Heat. They didn't bring in, I mean, Alec Burks, you know, they didn't do anything. They're the same people. I think that if they weren't the Heat and you didn't have this thought that they could just overperform expectations, I would be firmly in the trade Butler camp. You know, before he wants this super extension, he's 35. He's going to want max money, and he's going to not age well probably in the next contract. And maybe you can move him right now before that really scares people. I would say that for 29 other teams, but the Heat, I just don't think are going to go backwards like that. So I think they are what they are. We could pretty much fast forward until April, and nobody will want to play them in the first round.
Nobody will want to play them in the first round, but I think like this, hey, we're just going to be back in the pack, and Jimmy's probably going to miss 26, 30 different games, you know, because he does every season. He hasn't played a ton during the regular season when he was with the Heat. And then also he missed the playoffs last year, which was a death blow to their team. But like 2 years ago, it worked out for them. That's a really tough road now. It's much tougher to come from the back of the pack in the Eastern Conference where, you know, previously you had the Bucks at the top and, you know, some other good teams. Then you had the Celtics, but there wasn't really a logjam of other good teams. Now you've got the Celtics, who are defending NBA champions, followed by a really deep Knicks team, followed by a reconstituted Sixers team, followed by, oh yeah, by the way, the Bucks are still out there, the Cavs are still out there, and we just talked about the Orlando Magic. I actually have tentatively, I've reserved the right to move this around, but at present in the summer, as I'm, you know, thinking about this, I like the Magic as the 4th best team. So the East, all of a sudden, might have been you and me where we were talking about like the East might be better than we thought previously, but the East might be better than we thought previously. So if you're the Heat, you know, this whole like let's just mess around during the regular season, we'll figure it out in the postseason. I don't think you can do that anymore. It's not that easy.
I agree with that. And we talked about that with the Pacers.
Pacers too, yeah.
In terms of taking what you've been able to do in the past, which in the Heat's defense, their postseason successes have been less circumstantial and have been a product of them and Butler just being really, really good. But it does get dicey when you just take what has happened in the past. It's like the stock market, and you think that whatever happened last is going to continue happening. And so you're right. For the Pacers to think they're going to just go to the conference finals again, the way the 21 Hawks thought they were going to do that, and the Heat think they kind of stick around the 7 or 8 seed, win the play-in game, and then go upset the top seed in the first round. Those are not tent pole. They shouldn't be things you're leaning on to keep repeating every year. You're right. The East has gotten better. And also everything has to go your way. You can't, Butler has to be healthy for if you're going to pull off the first round upset. Like, to do that and think you're going to go all the way to the finals, go through 4 series, and Butler stays healthy and Adebayo stays healthy and your defense holds up at the point of attack with Hero and Rozier. Like, all these things have to go right. It's not an odds-on play. And so, again, I'm not a front office guy, so I don't know what they could have done. I don't know how they could, there are some teams that figure ways out and some teams that don't. The Heat have never really figured out any way to change their roster besides the Butler deal, but they always end up getting more out of what they do have on the roster. They have not been willing to overswing for Russell Westbrook. I remember going to media day years ago, and it was like, why didn't you trade for Westbrook? And they just weren't going to swing big for him, and they weren't going to overswing when Chris Paul was available, and they weren't going to overswing for Damian Lillard when everybody wanted that trade, and they just aren't going to do it. They believe in the success that they've had in the past. I think that's dicey because that only works until it stops working. Again, we all look like fools for this a lot of times saying this about the Heat, but I think the clock has run out. I just don't think the Heat can show up in the 7 seed and make a run to the finals. I don't consider them a real contender in the Eastern Conference.
This Eastern Conference is not the Eastern Conference from 2 years ago where they pulled that off. All right, let's do best and worst moves for the Heat from this offseason.
Oh, man. Caleb Martin getting away, you replace him with Alec Burks is, again, they didn't do much, but Martin pretty much won the conference finals for him 2 years ago. So, that can't be looked at as a great move. And good moves. What did they do? Again, like,
they re-signed Bam.
Yeah, okay. Then let's do that, because Bam is a legitimate, he's a foundational piece, pay him.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And he had a good Olympics.
He was terrific. Bam's a terrific player. He really is.
Yes.
The thing is Bam, again, I say this once every podcast, but, expectations are the root of frustration. And when Heat fans kind of start circling, the drain here a little bit with the Bam frustration, because it's like, dude, we need him to be a go-to guy. He's our second best player, and he's just not that guy. Like, he's great on the Olympics. He's an offensive hub. He's a backdoor passer. He's one of the 5 best defenders in the league, but you're not going to throw it to him in the post and get guaranteed offense, and which is what a lot of people expect out of the second best player on a team. So he's unique in that you got to re-sign him, but he can't be anything close to your best player if you're going to contend for a title. And that's their hesitance in getting rid of Jimmy Butler, is they need that 1A guy on the offensive end.
Those are good ones. I'm with you that Bam was their best moment. Re-signing him, and then also how he acquitted himself. He gets a gold medal. He fits in seamlessly with a bunch of stars around him. I'm with you also that he can't really be your best guy if you want to contend for a championship. Worst moment, the Caleb Martin thing is good. Evidently, he could have gotten more money if he just stuck around. There was like some weird clerical error communication issues with his agent. He washes up in Philadelphia. We're thankful for that. My worst moment for the Heat, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, was, okay, so initially Pat Riley said, hey, we're not going to extend Jimmy at $70 million or whatever it would be because he misses too many games. And let's just talk about it later. I thought it was quite funny that Jimmy Butler then said he wouldn't take the extension and re-sign with them. And I'm like, you're not taking the extension that they're not offering you? Is that what you're telling me right now, Jimmy Butler? Very amusing to me that it's, no, you're not divorcing me, I'm divorcing you. I love Jimmy. I hope he stays in the NBA forever because he's endlessly entertaining and very good content. But that's not a good situation when Jimmy Butler and Pat Riley are at loggerheads, and I don't know how they're going to resolve that situation. We're going to resolve our situation by taking a good. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that it's super, super dicey when you start getting to these guys in Butler's age range and their status in the league and the things they've achieved, just like James Harden with the Sixers and Draymond Green with the Warriors, and you end up paying for what they used to be, and you really end up regretting these things. But on the flip side, when you try to take that approach, it does not look good from a PR standpoint. And he's like, I'm not going to pay these guys. I mean, he did it with Dwayne Wade, and it's really kind of a no-win situation. I would not want to be in that situation in the front office and trying to forecast where Jimmy Butler's going and how much you're going to regret that deal 3 years from now. I mean, the reason the Sixers have Paul George is the Clippers were trying to speculate down the road of what he's going to be worth in 3 years. And Kawhi Leonard's not on a max, and James Harden hasn't got the money he's wanted for the past 3 years. So more and more teams are starting to look ahead on these players and not backwards. I think it's smart, but it's really a tight situation to navigate from just a relationship standpoint.
This feels really to me like end of the road, sort of like tear it down on the fly, reboot on the fly with Bam, but I don't know how they're going to be able to do that. We'll find out. We're going to take a quick break though, and then our Southeast Division deep dive will continue with some very scintillating teams. You don't want to miss it. You got the Hawks, the Wizards, and the Hornets coming up. It's going to be very exciting. You're watching and listening to Beyond the Arc.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John and Brad hanging out on a Friday. Just a reminder, in addition to being a podcast, you can also find us over on YouTube. Our page is at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. All right, so we're into the Atlanta Hawks, Brad. They were 36-46 last year, 10th in the East. They lost in the play-in to the Bulls. They were pretty good offensively. They were absolutely horrendous defensively, 27th in defensive rating. They go and they finally did what a lot of us were wondering when they would do it and how it would look if they were going to unplug either Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. They end up going DeJounte Murray, trade him to the Pelicans, get back Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance Jr., Cody Zeller. I would have gone the other way. I would have traded Trae Young and kept DeJounte Murray, because last year when Trae Young got hurt and they just had DeJounte Murray, that team went from being absolutely awful defensively to like middle of the pack. I think it says a lot, but they're going to charge forward with this. They also got the #1 pick in the draft. They have Zachary Reese-Shea, and Clint Capella is still there. I'm a big Jalen Johnson guy. This team is weird.
Yeah, weird's the right way. I'm really what is it? Reese-Shea?
Reese-Shea.
Okay, I'm glad you said that first. We've entered.
I hate it.
We've been entered the pronunciation Olympics.
When I was on HQ with Kiana when they drafted him, she and I were, before we went on air, saying Reese-Shea back and forth to each other so we could get it down, because it's not an easy one.
No, it's not. Back in the day when I would be in studio and a hockey brief would come on right before my segment, and I just it's like I need a Xanax to try to. I don't know how guys announce hockey games. Side note there, but yeah, the Hawks are weird. Okay, so this is actually the most fun team to talk about in this conference because they've had success in the fairly recent past. They're trying to win. They're I think the only team, rightly or wrongly, maybe you could say this about the Magic, but they're the team that of course the Heat do, but they're not doing anything. But they want to. They see themselves as like, I don't want to say top tier, but the Hawks, I believe, see themselves as somebody who should be competing for home court advantage, at least in the first round.
which is delusional.
Yeah, it is. But it's like you can sort of see on the surface how you could.
How hard am I squinting to see this?
Yeah, I know. But if you're in that war room and you're jaded by, sort of like how much you love your own kid, but he's kind of a brat, like they could sort of squint and say like, yo, we've got one of the most reliable offense creators in the world. He is, for all his flaws, Trae Young is like one step below Jokic in guaranteed offense. And if you have that, you can start tricking yourself into thinking that you can play above your head, that you have a puncher's chance against anyone. I even fall into it. Like, just get the Hawks in, and Trae Young for one series. Over time, his flaws are exposed. But I even trick myself into thinking he's one of those guys that can just take over a series. And I think they're too much leaning on that this bailout card, that they don't have to be good for the long term, but they can be good in short spurts and beat anybody. They're not that good of a team, but they do have good parts. You mentioned Jalen Johnson. You say you like him. Love him. We know
he's their best player. I mean, that's who they should be building around. It's not Trae Young.
Well, okay. I don't agree with that. He's a keeper. Let's put it that way. If you have a good team and Jalen Johnson is going to help you in a playoff, he's going to swing a playoff. He's like an Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, he's awesome and he can swing playoff games, but you can't build around him. I don't think. I don't think you're building around Hartenstein. I don't think you're building around him. I don't think you're building around OG Anunoby. But these guys,
I don't think you need to build around him. I'm just saying, like, he's their best player. If we're taking it in basketball on the whole, that's why I would unplug Trae Young, get whatever I can from him, and then hope to find whoever your best player is moving forward. Just a really useful piece. Jalen Johnson's a very good basketball player.
He is. I just, I don't think he's the best player. Now, like, if I think he's the player with the least weaknesses, I don't think there's no way you could convince me he has the ceiling of a Trae Young, but he's not somebody that you have to account for with the rest of your roster building. Like, with Trae Young has that ceiling, but you have to like build around him in such a perfect way. And that's why I said the Damian Lillard deal to the Bucks was gonna sort of be a trial for this whole archetype of player, because you have to build a really, really perfect team to then reap the benefits of an offense-only, ball-dominant point guard. You have to have just like a perfect team, and that's very tough to construct. And so I'm with you. I would have rather traded Trae Young and kept DeJounte Murray, but you have to know the market. I think a lot of teams know exactly what you're saying. I don't think Trae Young's bringing back the bank. And I think you could argue DeJounte Murray was actually more tradable. He's making less money. He's a two-way player. And he's not going to dominate the ball. And so I don't know what team was out there. They got 2 picks and Dyson Daniels for Murray. I like Dyson Daniels. Reza Shea, if I said that right, and
you nailed it.
DeAndre Hunter's still there, and Daniels. If you had Murray, you could start thinking about a legitimate defensive team that can switch everything. And then you go ahead and make the deal for Clint Capella. They should trade him, get a Kongu in there starting, and all of a sudden 4 of your 5 guys are good defensive players. So that's why I say the Hawks are interesting to me, because, and we haven't even mentioned Bogdanović. They have
he's good
7 or 8 like good, really good, not really, but stone cold good NBA players. And the teams we're going to talk about after, they just don't have that. So the Hawks, you can see them looking through a parent's eye and saying, we got some good guys. Our kids are pretty good now. We got 8 players. And
the problem is that they can't get out of their own way. I mean, you mentioned Clint Capella. I think that they'd like to move Clint Capella. They haven't done it yet for reasons surpassing understanding. I would take whatever I could just to unplug him, because you mentioned Onyeka Okongwu right behind him, who I would want to have as my starting center, especially alongside Jalen Johnson. And then you bring in Reza Shea, and let's see what these young guys can do a little bit. And Trae Young, our mileage varies between the two of us on it, but fine. I get what you're saying. It's just that I would like to see Landry Fields speed up the timeline on this a little bit. Let's do best and worst moments for the Hawks.
Well, I think the DeJounte Murray deal was a good deal. I truly think that he was going to get more on the market than Trae Young. That's again, these are all, we talk about it with Jalen Johnson and Trae Young, who's a better player. Same thing with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. Trae Young feels like he has a higher ceiling, but I think Murray's probably a better player. I think, truth be told, they traded their more valuable piece. And they got 2 picks back, relatively decent, valuable first-round picks. And I like Dyson Daniels. I was high on him in the Olympics. I think he was really productive. Useful. Yeah, he's really useful. That's the right word. And he's a serious defender. And so as long as they have Trae Young on the roster, they're going to have as many defenders as possible. You just have to. And they're going to need elite rim protection, because even if you have the switchable pieces around Trae Young, he's going to get hunted. He's going to get isolated.
Yes.
And he's going to need backup at the rim. And so Letta Kongu, I think, Clint Capella, that's how they made that run in 21. Clint Capella was like awesome defensively. And that blueprint maybe has probably worn out. But they need somebody, really at the rim. But I like the Murray trade because they got, I think, more value than they could have got for Young. What I don't like is exactly what we're saying about the Heat, what I think the Hawks have largely been doing since 2021. They're looking in the wrong places to get better. Bringing in Quinn Snyder with the same roster. We talked about it the other day. There's not very many coaches that move the needle. Most of them are roster dependent. You're not coming in and changing what the Hawks are with Trae Young at the forefront. So I just don't like that. Really, for the last 3 years, they've been really complacent, sort of like the Bulls. I don't know what's out there, but I think something's out there for Clint Capella. I think something's out there for DeAndre Hunter. I think something is out there for Bogdanovich. And they have just kind of said, we had success 3 years ago. Let's just get in at the bottom of the seed and let Trae Young try to get hot. So I don't like their overall approach for the last 3 years, but I do think the Murray deal was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, we're saying the same thing. I just want to see them speed it up. Let's speed it up, because this version is not going to work. And, you finally did the DeJounte Murray trade. Let's move some more pieces around the board.
But don't you think, John, let me ask you this. Don't you think,
sure,
even though it was the last front office, dude, they traded Trae Young for Luka Doncic, and he doesn't have –
not great.
And he doesn't have this huge market value. So, it's really difficult to say, man, I understand. I don't think I'm not you can win with Trae Young guy. So I do think there's sort of a cut the cord factor here. But, man, you gave up Luka Doncic and you're going to go out and get 2 picks for Trae. It's pretty brutal. So you can start to see the case that it's more valuable to just keep hoping he develops a little bit. If not defensively, at least some off-ball movement. That's the bigger thing with Trae Young for me, is I don't think he's ever going to be a defender, but he's got to start moving off the ball. They get too stale, even though their offense says 6th in the league. It's too stale, man. Guys. I don't know why guys like Trae Young, like Damian Lillard, why they are not taking a page out of Stephen Curry's book, as they have watched him take his game to an increasingly better level. On top of just being the best shooter, it's his movement, it's his relocation, it's his impromptu, randomized actions that gets him these shots and opens up the entire offense. This should be the whole podcast. Why these guys who are good shooters, why they refuse to give the ball up and then move around to get it back. These guys standing at 35 feet and wait after they pass it and nothing materializes, so they run over and get a dribble handoff. They're doing nothing for the offense. I don't understand. It's a copycat league. People copy each other's defensive schemes. One team starts switching, everybody starts switching. Not a single other shooting point guard in the league has adopted what Steph Curry has changed the entire league by doing. I have no clue why. It is something.
It could be because he's Steph Curry. I mean, it's tough to replicate.
No, but yes, you might not be that shooter, but you can move. It's there's a degree of defense, for instance, that is more talent than people give it credit for. It's length, it's instincts, it's all this. But there's a certain amount of defense that is want to, that is hustle, that is willingness, that is focus. And there is a certain amount of off-ball movement. I don't know if you can recreate Curry's instincts for space or his intuition for the way the defense is shifting. But I do know that anybody who can shoot, Damian Lillard, Trae Young, all they have to do is high school pass, screen away, cut through the lane, just move. And they're going to, at the very least, open up. And almost nobody has done it. All these guys come into the league with pure ball control. They only know how to operate with the ball in their hands. And it's the blueprint is sitting right there to move. Nobody does it. They copy every other thing in the league, but nobody does it.
JJ Redick was pretty good at it.
But he's not a point guard. He was good at it. Yet Klay Thompson does. But I'm talking about these guys who have the ball in their hands, give it up, and then get it back. I don't know. Tangent.
Well, that'll be a different pod. Well, you can yell at people for not running more. But for now, my best and worst moment for the Hawks was tied to the same thing, which is lucking into the first pick, right? They got the first pick. Congratulations. Unfortunately for them, it was the first pick in this draft, but we'll see. Reece Shea, he had some nice moments. He certainly wasn't Alex Sarr in Summer League, so I guess that's a positive.
I totally forgot about that. Man, the Hawks.
Yeah.
The one year they finally beat the odds. They were supposed to be what, like the 10th pick or
3%
something?
3% chance.
Oh, my God. So the 1 year you jump up, you get the first pick, and you get the worst draft. Unbelievable. I forgot about that. That's the worst. The timing of landing. I think it's the first number one pick in the franchise history, right?
No, since I believe it was like 70. It was like 50 years. Yeah.
Okay, so
49 years, something like
twice a century. You get. I mean, that's the worst. I totally forgot about that. Unbelievable. Yeah. They finally get it. And they get this
rough run for the Hawks. Brings us to the last two teams in the Southeast Division, which we're not going to super belabor these. You got the Charlotte Hornets first, 21-61 last year, 13th in the East. They were horrendous offensively, horrendous defensively, 28th in offense, 29th in defense. LaMelo went down again. They ended up bringing back Miles Bridges. I'm not sure what kind of market was out there for Miles Bridges because of everything that's happening with him off the court. But he is, a useful basketball player. Seth Curry's coming back. They're $23 million under the cap. This whole situation basically can be boiled down to the Hornets are bad. They're going to be tanking for Cooper Flag. And can Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball play well together? They also drafted Tijon Salon, and we'll see how he works out. But in the absence of LaMelo Ball, I am a big believer in Brandon Miller. His favorite player growing up was PG. He's kind of a PG starter kit to me. I just want to know, is it going to be LaMelo's team? Because it feels like it should be Brandon Miller's team. And then how would LaMelo deal with that? And then, how do they look together?
I mean, at this point, you need both of these. I sometimes think these conversations about whose team it is, I think they apply much more to when you're bringing in these super established, like max NBA players at the prime of their career. When you're in the younger stages of development, man, you just need a ton of good players and forget about whose team it is. Like the Pistons I don't care if it's Cade Cunningham, it probably is Cade Cunningham's team, but all those guys need to be good for them to have a chance. So LaMelo and Brandon Miller need to be really good. I'm still sour about the Warriors not getting LaMelo Ball. I mean, unbelievable we took James Wiseman, but LaMelo Ball is a good player, and he's got height. The big thing with LaMelo Ball is he's Trae Young, but taller. And so he can with some want to, he can be useful defensively. But I'm with you. I love Brandon Miller. And that's the only two reasons to watch the Hornets play. If they somehow landed Cooper Flag, now you've got like serious like positional depth. I shouldn't say depth, versatility. Because none of these guys, unlike in Detroit, are overlapping. You've got LaMelo at the point. You've got Brandon Miller as the perfect off-ball player, and then you got Cooper Flag. So, I mean, if somehow the stars aligned and they ended up with that, serious reason now to start watching the Hornets. Right now, it's LaMelo Ball, who's been an all-star, and Brandon Miller. I think Brandon Miller is really, really, really good.
Producer Aaron and I were talking about this before the show started. Just about like, are the Hornets bad enough to like really tank into the Cooper Flag sweepstakes? I think they are. And then it just becomes like, because of the way that the lotto was smoothed out post Sam Hinkie,
right.
Just, hey, it broke right for the Hawks.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to have a 3% chance. I think that the Hornets will have a much greater chance than 3% because they're going to be, along with the Wizards and the Pistons, the worst team in the East this year. So, depending on the development of Brandon Miller and also like how healthy can LaMelo Ball stay? He hasn't stayed healthy. And when he goes, they also have Mark Williams. Mark Williams is not a bad player, but he also hasn't been able to stay healthy. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, whether or not they can stay healthy. And then also the LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller thing is going to be interesting. Give me your best and worst moment for the Hornets.
Geez, best is gonna be tough. What was the pronunciation Olympic guy that they drafted? It's like Siarm.
Are you talking about Tajon Salon?
Salon, yeah. This guy, he's years away, super young. But I'm just gonna anytime you get a lot,
but it's one of those. But it's Salon,
It's Tajay, yeah.
He,
if you watch, he's raw. But if you watch some of his stuff, like, for a team that didn't do anything that anybody cares about in the offseason, getting a lottery pick and somebody that you're obviously hoping develops. In this draft, you have to temper your expectations, but getting somebody that you hope develops into a foundational piece would have to be the best. I think Bridges is clearly the worst because not only just is he like a pretty bad dude, and they just kind of stuck with him after he was out of the league for a year, and I think he got $75 million. Like, he's not that good of a player. He's talented, but he makes no difference in terms of winning. He's a guy that he's a pretty empty calorie scorer. He could be. He seems like physically he could be a good defender, but he's not. He's just nothing to me. I wouldn't want him on my team for a number of reasons, and I certainly wouldn't want to pay him $75 million.
It's a lot of money for him, for sure. Best moment for me, Charles Lee, new head coach. That's fun. And then worst moment for me, all the rest of it, really. They are $23 million under the cap. So at least they're not paying much for this, what's going to be a very bad team. But they got fun jerseys. And as I mentioned, Brandon Miller is a reason for optimism. All right, last one for you in the Southeast Conference. Washington Wizards, man, they were bad. And for reasons surpassing understanding, Kyle Kuzma decided that he didn't want to leave and go to Dallas because they're building something in Washington. What they are building, I do not know. 15-67 last year, 14th in the Eastern Conference. Bad offensively and defensively, 25th in offense, 28th in defense. They added Jonas Valanciunas. You can see in the thought bubble above my head, there's a question mark. They lost Denny Avia in a trade. They've got Alex Sarr, who he had like half a good moment at Summer League, like just could not shoot at all. Looked really bad. You could see, Brad, like physically, gift-wise, this kid is an athlete. And I think he's going to be a useful NBA player, but man, was he bad shooting the ball.
Oh, he looked so terrible. He looked so terrible. Yeah,
he did. And then Jordan Poole, who was like basically the number one Shaqtin' a Fool highlight reel all year last year. They're super into tanking for Cooper Flag on this team.
Yeah, bring back relegation. This is not even who's the black sheep brother in Succession? Who's Connor, the dude who's running for president? Is it Connor? It's Connor, right? The Ferris Bueller's Day Off guy. Yeah, they're like this. Yeah. This is we've
Alan
reached.
Rick.
Like,
no.
Yeah, this is like
that's somebody else.
Because I think the Succession family is the Southeast Division here, where like it's all trash. But the Wizards are the guy who's running for president. Like, just like send them off to New Mexico and give them some money and let them be. Because this is the only reason to watch the Wizards is for whatever has happened to my guy Jordan Poole. My guy
Alan Ruck. I was close. Alan Ruck.
Yeah, but his name in the show is Connor, right? I'm pretty sure. Anyway, idiot. And the Wizards of of the Roys. But anyway, the only reason, whatever happened to Jordan Poole, I can't figure it out. Somewhat predictable, I guess, given his play style and, let's call it undisciplined as a euphemism. But, when he got into his own team with no stakes and no structure around it, I guess you could kind of see that this was going to happen. But, like, dude was one of the main reasons the Warriors won the title. I mean, really, truly was. The only guy on the team that could create offense besides Curry off the dribble. He was big time for them. And he turned into an absolute, like, there's actually he does such stupid stuff. There's actually a reason to watch the Wizards. And so to me, that's the only reason to even tune into this team. They brought it down.
There was a moment last year where, I mean, there was several moments last year where, like, I encourage everybody to go back and watch the Jordan Poole low light reel from last year, because it's pretty amazing. Great. But there was one moment last year where he, like, tipped over beyond the 3-point line, just, like, kind of fell over, and instead of, like, looking to pass or calling a timeout, he almost shot it, and you could hear his teammates saying no. He was sitting beyond the 3-point line on his butt, and he looked like he was gonna shoot it, and they had to tell him not to. It was incredible. It was incredible. He's a delight. He's a wonder. In fact, let's do best and worst moments for them. I'm gonna go first on this one. Best moment is everything Jordan Poole did to end up on Shacked in a Fool, because it was just endlessly entertaining. I know it sucks for Wizards fans. I have a couple Wizards fans in my life, but man, he is just like, it's just so, he's the new Nick Young. Nick Young would do stuff and you'd be like, look, that was a terrible basketball play. I got to see Nick Young up close in person when I covered the Sixers, and he would do things you would be like, I don't understand why you would do that, Nick Young. Didn't matter. Super entertaining. And then the worst moment for me, Kyle Kuzma. What are you doing? And also the Wizards, what are you doing? Kyle Kuzma says, I want to stay put. And they go, yeah, okay. Like, he's a tradable piece, man. First, get out and go somewhere if you're the player. And second, trade the guy that could help you win games when you're trying to lose games. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I agree. Not trading Kuzma is, in the past, this is like going to turn into like a Caruso situation. Like they're going to end up not being able to get anything for him. They should have traded him. It's weird. I mean, I guess you have to spend money somewhere, but it's weird that Valanciunas and Brogdon. They got Brogdon, right? They got Brogdon back in the Blazers deal. Yeah, it's like, Advia is actually a good player and is somebody that is still on a long enough timeline that, I would have maybe liked to keep him around, but I don't love losing him. Again, there's always more context to why teams do these things, but I think the worst move is not dealing. If you take them as a whole, not dealing Kuzma and dealing Advia is kind of sketchy to me. And then also, the Sarr kid. I mean, athlete, whatever. Like, I guess I'm still scarred by James Wiseman, but when I see guys that are tall and athletic and have all these tangible things, and then you watch them play basketball, and it's like, I don't know, man. I don't think dude's a basketball. Defensively, I thought he was pretty good at Summer League, but offensively, he looked like he was doing his KD impression, but he is not Kevin Durant, and like he was playing like that, where he certain moves in the mid range, or pull ups from three, or when he tried to do blow bys or whatever, and like none of it was falling. And I'm like, oh no, he has some stuff to work on his offensive game. But hey, good news, Wizards fans, you're going to get 82 games of the Wizards this year, so maybe he'll play in a bunch of work on his offensive game. That's going to be it for our Southeast Division deep dive. This was super fun, Brad. Thank you for doing this. Make sure to read Brad Botkin at cbssports.com. Anything you want to promote? What are you working on? Oh, man, we're just trying to find stuff to keep talking NBA right now in the summer. So I think what I'm going to do this week is building off of Steph Curry's shots at the Olympics. I'm going to do the 20 most memorable shots of my life. And I'm having a lot of fun actually going back and thinking about the shots I remember as a kid, and the Lillard shot, and I remember the Derek Fisher shot, and so many of these shots just kind of come back. The Alonzo Mourning shot. It's going to be I would like to lobby for Allen Iverson's step over Tyrone. Oh yeah, Ty Lue shot. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So going back through through the tape and remembering some of these shots that I can pretty much remember what age I was and where I watched it and where I was at in life. It's kind of a fun exercise for the off season. So I'm gonna do that here in the next week.
That's great. Yeah, we're in the summer, and that's the kind of things that we do in the summer when the NBA is shut down. And now we're going to shut down Beyond the Arc. We thank you once again for listening. Like Brad said, go check out his best shots from history story that'll be up on CBSSports.com. And then Bill will be back at it next week with the Western Conference Division deep dives. That's when we're going to start those. So be sure to check that out as well. But for now, for Brad Botkin, I am John Gonzalez. I thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great weekend, everybody.